Hey there, welcome to Unit 2, Lesson 8. We're getting closer and closer to the end of this very long unit. Today we are going to wrap up the revolution and talk about how the Revolutionary War ended up affecting different groups of people, both in positive and negative ways, like these loyalists that you see in this picture right here about, the fact that they're not going to be too happy. So let's talk about what you're doing today. I'm going to make it a pretty easy day for you. You're going to need to fill in your interactive notebook page while we're going through these notes, but that's it. After that, I'm going to give you the rest of the time to be able to work on any missing work you might have or work on your extra credit. So all we got to do today is fill in that interactive notebook page as we are going along. This is the page that you need to be filling out today. So you need to find the one that says effects of the Revolutionary War, and we are going to fill out this chart as we're going along. Please make sure that you do not forget that this interactive notebook is a quiz grade, y'all, and it is due the day of your test. So you need to be filling this out as we are going along. So let's go ahead and hop into it. I got 3 slides to go through, and then that's it. And you're going to fill out your interactive notebook page, and then you're on your own to make sure that you're getting caught up on everything for the rest of the class period. So here we go. The first group we're going to talk about is obviously colonists that are going to be affected, but we're going to focus on the patriot side. So the people who were actually in favor of the war. So before the war actually happened, they saw themselves as being mistreated by the British and were very unhappy, hence the reason why they wanted to go and get independence. They were involved in the revolution by being the ones that were fighting. They joined the colonial militias and they fought valiantly against the British. Excuse me. Then the next column that we're looking at is how this group was affected by the revolution. Was it in a positive or negative way? And most people would obviously that were on this side view their life because of the revolution as being affected in a positive way because they were able to gain independence, and some people that participated were able to become high-ranking members of society and government, like Alexander Hamilton, for example. The Revolutionary War, was it going to be beneficial for this group? Why or why not? When it comes to the Patriots, definitely. Yes, they got what they want. They went out and they fought and they won the war. So this was going to be something that they saw as beneficial for themselves. Moving on to other colonists, which would have been the loyalists, those who were against the fight for independence. Typically speaking, these were going to be members who were higher up in kind of income levels and high-ranking society members because they were the ones who were benefiting from the British being in control. So usually they were going to be the ones that didn't want to see anything change. So before this, they were living a happy life that they didn't want to have messed with. During the revolution, they actually helped the British in a lot of ways. They serve as spies sometimes and share that information with the British. Some of them went and fought on the side of the British. It is thought that about 20% of the population of the colonists were actually loyalists. And I want you to think about that. That's actually a really large group. That's 1 out of every 5 colonists technically didn't want to fight for independence. And so that was just a huge group of people. They would be affected obviously negatively by the war because of the fact that they were on the losing side during the war, and even after the war, they would be subjected to public humiliation. Some of them would be violently attacked. So things weren't going so great for them. And so after the war was over, it wasn't really beneficial for them. And so as a result of this, a lot of them ended up either fleeing and going back to Britain or going up to Canada, where Britain still had control there as well. The next group that we want to talk about, you learned a little bit more about yesterday in your assignment, and that is about women. Before the war, women were seen as inferior to men. They didn't really have any legal rights. That's not really going to end up changing too much. Their job during the revolution, as you learned from the video yesterday, was to take care of everything back home, continue to run businesses if their husbands had a business, continue to basically run the farm if there was a farm. Some of them would serve as spies. So they had their very important roles during the revolution. They were affected by the war in a little bit of a positive way. Not much changed, like I said, but the revolution ends up leading it to this idea of Republican motherhood. And we're not talking like Republican versus Democrat, but as in the idea that we established a republic, a democracy for ourselves. And it kind of became the role of women to make sure that they told these stories and educated their children about the importance of our democracy, about how it came to be. And because women were expected to carry on that information to their children, they themselves had to become more educated as well. So we do see an increase in education, which is going to be a positive thing for women after the revolution. For the most part, though, as I said, it's typically going to be about the same. Some people would argue that things got a little bit better for women after the war was over, but it really doesn't end up changing that much. Let's move on to African Americans now. So slaves and then free Black Americans in the United States. So before the war, they had no legal rights. Again, that's not really going to change. There's not going to be a lot of opportunity for success for them. Some of them are going to serve in the military, as you saw in your Ed puzzle. Some served in the military on the side of the British because the British promised freedom to them if they were to win. Some wanted to go and fight on the side of the colonists because of the fact that they felt that they would possibly be able to get their freedom as a result of doing that. So some of them were going to be serving in the military, but a lot were still going to be responsible for making sure they took care of the land back on the plantations, especially in the South. These ideas of slavery or these new ideas of liberty and equality would kind of come forward and start to challenge the idea of slavery. And so they were hoping that, you know, as a result, people might see the hypocrisy of when in the Declaration of Independence, you say all men are created equal, but really you're not applying that to all men. So they were hoping to be able to get some things out of the revolution, but it doesn't really end up being a positive or negative because it just kind of ends up staying the same. As a result of the war, slavery is going to continue. Rights for Black people in the United States were still going to be non-existent for the most part, although we do start to see some states, especially up north, outlawing slavery. That doesn't mean that race relations were great and that they were treated as equals, but we do see the outlaw of slavery happening in some of those states. The last group that we want to talk about is the Native Americans. So before the war, obviously we know that Native American land kept being taken and taken and taken by the British, but there were restrictions that were put into place. Remember that Proclamation of 1763 line that said like Britain owned this land, but the colonists couldn't move onto it, which is part of why the Native Americans wanted the British to win, because they knew that if the colonists would win and they would gain their independence, that proclamation line was going to go away. And that's exactly what happened. So many of them sided on the British side and were fearful of the colonists taking their land if they were going to win. They obviously have a negative effect that comes back from the war because a lot of their land will be taken and they were not really included in the negotiations at all in the end of the war. So was the war beneficial for this group? No, not at all. Native Americans were continued to be pushed further and further off of their land. And then there would be continual broken treaties between the US government and Native Americans where they'd make a treaty, make an agreement, and then the US government would be like, nope, never mind, we're just going to go against it anyway. And so that continually happens. And we do not see the relationship with Native Americans really improving at this time. So last thing is I want to talk to you about what is coming up next. So the next 2 days are our ACT days. We talked about this in class, but if you are watching this video, it means that you most likely were not present in class. So I wanted to make sure that we would go over this. So for the next 2 days, you only have one assignment to complete. If you are a last name A through J, then you will be completing the assignment on Thursday or on Friday, or no, sorry, let me rewind that, on Thursday because we don't do Fridays. So on Thursday, whenever everybody else is taking the ACT. If you are last name K through Z, you are going to do this assignment on Wednesday, when everybody else is taking the ACT and you aren't. So basically, you just need to get this done either on Wednesday or Thursday. And you're going to be doing an assignment about the new government called the Articles of Confederation. And honestly, you've learned about this in civics. I know that you learned about it before in elementary and middle school. So this should really be kind of just a little bit of a review. You're going to be going in and looking at what some of the problems were with our first country and our first government when we set it up. So that brings us to the end of the notes. You need to make sure that you've got that interactive notebook page filled in. And then other than that, I just need you to work on any missing assignments that you might have and get yourself caught up, because we've got too many people that are failing or very close to failing and are missing tons of assignments. So as always, get in touch with me if you need me. You know how to reach out to me, and I will see you guys later. Bye, y'all.